Senator Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Yates, for being here and for all of the assistance you've given to us whenever we've had questions. We've appreciated the Department's willingness to not only reach out, but also to respond quickly to our questions. Since my time as a federal prosecutor, I've been concerned about the excesses of our federal criminal justice system. In many cases, the long sentences required by our federal minimum mandatory laws result in sentences that simply don't fit the crime. That's to say, they're too long, and in many cases, they're objectively unjust. That's why more than 2 years ago, Senator Durbin and I teamed up on this issue, and we first introduced the Smarter Sentencing Act. Now, I believe we can make federal sentencing more fair and more efficient without doing anything to undermine public safety. And in fact, I believe we can do this in a way that will actually enhance public safety by increasing the efficiencies and therefore the effectiveness of our federal criminal justice system. The Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act achieves that goal by doing some things to reform the most severe penalties that often lead to disproportionate sentences, by expanding the availability of the safety valve and by increasing opportunities and incentives for rehabilitative programming within the prison system for those that are already there. Now, General Yates, you testified a minute ago, and I just want to reiterate that this bill does nothing to eliminate any minimum mandatory sentence available under existing law. It does nothing of the sort, correct?
No, they're all still in place.
Nor does it do anything to reduce the statutory maximum for any crime currently on the books within the federal penal system.
No, it does not.
Doesn't do anything. In fact, in some cases, it raises the maximum. And in other cases, we create new minimum mandatory penalties that don't already exist. Now, some opponents of sentencing reform, of the type of reform effort that we're trying to undertake here, believe that reducing mandatory minimums will necessarily unavoidably undermine our ability to keep the American people safe. You've been an outspoken opinion leader on this issue, and you've testified that you believe sentencing reform will actually enhance our ability to keep the American people safe. Tell us a little bit of why you think this is the case. Elaborate on this belief that you've got.
Well, I believe that we need to act now really to be able to ensure the safety of our communities by being able to take some of the money that we're unnecessarily spending on the Bureau of Prisons and to be able to use it more thoughtfully to be able to keep our communities safe. Senator Cornyn was speaking a moment ago about some of the innovative programs in Texas. We're not doing enough of that in the federal system. We're trying to do some, but frankly, we're not doing enough. We need to be spending more time on prevention. We need to be spending more time and more money on reentry. Those are the things that are really going to have an impact on keeping our communities safe. Senator Sessions mentioned the recidivism rates. You know, our recidivism rate has stayed the same over the last 30 years, despite our high incarceration rates. And so that tells you that we need to be investing more. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that it's going to keep our communities safer. We also can look to the experience of the states and to see the 29 states across the country that have enacted really meaningful sentencing reform, and all of those states have experienced a decrease in violent crime. Violent crimes decreased across the country entirely, but it has gone down more in states that have enacted meaningful criminal justice reform than any place else.
Now, some critics of this legislation will point to that aspect of our bill and will criticize it, saying that federal offenders are by nature just very different than their state counterparts, that they're a different type of offender, such that the type of reform mechanism in place already in many of the states, these reform programs that are so successful in so many of our states, just have no place within the federal system. Now, perhaps that may have been true 100 years ago or even 50 or 60 years ago, but in my experience as an assistant U.S. attorney, I don't think it's always the case anymore. Right. There are certainly areas where that's true, but there are plenty of others where those who are being prosecuted in the federal system are not necessarily inherently different than those that are being prosecuted in the state system. So in light of that, in light of the fact that not everybody we're going after in the nonviolent drug offender arena is necessarily a kingpin, don't you think some of those lower level offenders could benefit from these programs in the same way that many offenders have benefited within the state system?
Absolutely. There's certainly a category of defendants that is qualitatively different in the federal system than the state system. But importantly, this reform is not aimed at those defendants. This reform is aimed at the defendants that are very much like those that are being prosecuted in the state. Again, the lower level drug defendants.
And there may have been a time many decades ago when we weren't going after very many of those people through our federal system, but we are now. There are a variety of reasons for that, and we don't need to get into that. We don't have time to get into that now. But that's one of the reasons why we need these provisions in federal law today. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General Yates.
Senator Whitehouse.